I'm going to look here at the Wikipedia for ion wind. This is the wind that kicks up with the plasma fires in so many events, from Paradise to Hawaii to Boulder, Colorado to the Cleveland Flats fire to all of these other fires. The winds kick up at the same time as the fire, and this is why. It's called ion wind, ionic wind, corona wind, or electric wind is the airflow induced by electrostatic forces linked to corona discharge arising at the tips of some sharp conductors, such as points or blades, subjected to high voltage relative to the ground. Ion wind is an electrohydrodynamic phenomenon. Ion wind generators can also be considered electrohydrodynamic thrusters. An electrostatic pinwheel or corona spinner attached to a small Wimshurst machine, electrostatic generator. The term ionic wind is considered a misnomer due to misconceptions that only positive and negative ions were primarily involved in the phenomenon. A 2018 study found that electrons play a larger role than the negative ions during the negative voltage period. As a result, the term electric wind has been suggested as a more accurate terminology. This phenomenon is now used in an MIT ionic wind plane, the first solid-state plane developed in 2018. The mechanism. Net electric charges on conductors, including local charge distributions associated with dipoles, reside entirely on their external surface, see Faraday cage, and tend to concentrate more around sharp points and edges than on flat surfaces. This means that the electric field generated by charges on a sharp conductive point is much stronger than the field generated by the same charge residing on a large, smooth, spherical conductive shell. Side note, that's why J-Dreamers, I've heard him talk about the reason buildings have spires and domes all throughout history is based on whether or not they want to conduct the electricity or deflect the electricity. The spire conducts the electricity, the dome deflects the electricity, like on a large, smooth, spherical conductive shell. When this electrical field strength exceeds what is known as the corona discharge inception voltage gradient, it ionizes the air about the tip, and a small faint purple jet of plasma can be seen in the dark on the conductive tip. This is what J. Dreamer refers to as the blue beam that comes out of Mount Meru. Ionized air, a small purple plasma jet. Ionization of the nearby air molecules results in the generation of ionized air molecules having the same polarity as that of the charged tip. Subsequently, the tip repels the like-charged ion cloud, and the ion cloud immediately expands due to the repulsion between the ions themselves. This repulsion of ions creates an electric wind that emanates from the tip, which is usually accompanied by a hissing noise due to the change in air pressure at the tip. An opposite force acts on the tip that may recoil if not tight to ground. A vanillus ion wind generator performs the inverse function using ambient wind to move ions which are collected yielding electrical energy. So I could have that backwards. Maybe to repel the electricity, they put a spire on the building, and in order to attract or draw, it's spherical. But J. Dreamers definitely references the difference between these shapes in buildings as it relates to their ability to conduct or repel the electricity. The history. B. Wilson in 1750 demonstrated the recoil force associated to the same corona discharge, and precursor to the ion thruster was the corona discharge pinwheel. A corona discharge from the freely rotating pinwheel arm with ends bent to sharp points gives the air a space gives the air a space charge which repels the points because the polarity is the same for the point and the air. Francis Huxley, curator of instruments for the Royal Society of London, made the earliest report of electric wind in 1709. Myron Robinson completed an extensive biography and literature review during the 1950s resurgence of interest in the phenomenon. In 2018, researchers from South Korea and Slovenia used Schillerin photography to experimentally determine that electrons, in addition to ions, play an important role in generating ionic wind. The study was the first to provide direct evidence that the electrohydrodynamic force responsible for the ionic wind is caused by a charged particle drag that occurs as the electrons and the ions push the neutral particles away. In 2018, a team of MIT researchers built and successfully flew the first ever prototype plane propelled by ionic wind. That plane has no moving parts. That also points to the so-called conspiracy theory that these jets at these airports are not burning the amount of fuel that they claim to be, and they are running on some sort of other technology. I won't get into that now, but those wings can't hold the amount of fuel that they claim they do. And if they were burning the amount of fuel that they claim at these airports, you would see a line of tanker trucks coming in and going out all day long, or they would have to have a pipeline built directly to each major international airport. These are examples of bladeless fans that use the same principle. I remember seeing one called the Ion Breeze. First one I ever saw in an infomercial. Maybe those jets are running on something similar. This is a bit of a side note because I wanted this video to be short and concise about the ion wind that is associated with plasma fire. But since I touched on the subject, Custodian File has endless examples of these small UFOs that are clearly using some sort of anti-gravitational technology that gets them up to about 2,000 miles an hour. And he has endless supply. He can supply you with a video on demand. You tell him what time of day and location you want him to take one of these videos, and he can produce it. These things are that predictable that you can bait them to trigger them to come buzz your aircraft once you break the 150-foot barrier. But back to the ionic wind. There's plenty of information available on this technology. Here you see it says designing a next generation ionic thruster. Here, the first airplane propelled by ionic wind. That's the one built by MIT in 2018. So the idea that airliners are using these ionic thrusters is not out of the question. Primarily, it seems to me 99% that this is the principle or the phenomenon that is associated with the wind that kicks up at the same time as plasma fires.